Hello guys, this is your friend Dark Fox Sage. And we are back with our new fanfic, which is, what if Naruto hides his powers to save himself and his loved ones from the council and villagers? And if you enjoy this fanfic, then subscribe to the channel and like the video, it motivates me to upload more fanfics like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfic. Yo, my name is Uzumaki Naruto. For the last 12 years of my life, I have been living a lie. What do you mean by that, you ask? Simple. People hate me. They think I don't know why they hate me. Oh, how wrong they are. You see, from an early age, people took pleasure in beating me and ridiculing me. Often, the word, demon, would come up in the beatings. Many years ago, I decided crying and just accepting the fact that people hate me and crying over it wasn't a good life to lead. I decided to find out what could possibly make them hate me so much. I quickly learned the henge skill at age 9 after a few failed attempts to get into the Konoha library as myself. After learning the henge skill, I walked in and straight past the receptionist who smiled at me. I had chosen the appearance of one very well-known Uchiha Sasuke. Since I had decided to use him as my appearance, I thought I should probably try to lean about his behavior patterns in case someone questioned me on something. Once inside, I had no idea where to start searching. The only clue I had was demon and also kitsune, which was muttered less often than demon. I went straight to the history section and looked for mythological creatures. There was a small passage on kitsunes, which I read, but it gave me only one small clue. Kitsunes could have a number of tails, depending on how powerful they were. The maximum was 9. I decided to search the history section of Konoha, and I flipped through the index, until I found exactly what I wanted. Going to the page, I saw that 9 years ago on my birthday, the Lord of Demons, the Kyuubi no Kitsune had attacked Konoha, and many ninjas had been sacrificed to beat it. However, among the list of those who died was the Yondaime Hokage. Apparently, he had not only killed himself, but the Kyuubi too. This made me think, if he killed it, then why do they call me demon? Unless Naruto thought about something. He had overheard two Junin talking about shinjutsus, or suicide techniques. Naruto eagerly went and looked up a book with jutsu types and a list of the known ones. He heard the librarian walk up to him and smile. Forgive me, Sasuke-san, but we are closing for the afternoon. If you want, you can borrow that book and a few others for the night. I looked up, and gave away no emotions. I turned to her and looked her in the eye. Do you have any books on shinjutsu and a list of them, especially ones known to belong only to Konoha ninjas? The librarian frowned as she concentrated. Well, we do have a book on all known shinjutsus of this village, but we require special permission from Hokage-sama himself for anyone to view the book, and we are not allowed to let it leave its place. Naruto scowled, initiating Sasuke perfectly. This seemed to have the desired effect on the young librarian, as she smiled at him. I'm sure Hokage-sama will give you permission. I will send a request to him tomorrow morning. If you come at about lunchtime, you should be allowed to see it. Naruto nodded his thanks and put the book back, before walking out the door. Once he had gotten into an empty alley, I released the henge, and scowled. God, Sasuke's such a cold-hearted bastard. Can't really blame him though, since he saw his whole clan killed in front of him. Naruto walked home, eagerly waiting to get to that book. After a quick bowl of cup ramen, Naruto brushed his teeth and went to bed. Next morning, 11 a.m. Naruto had been up for several hours now. However, the problem was finding Sasuke to use him for a henge. At around about 11 a.m., he saw Sasuke running down the street. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Sasuke doesn't usually run, it makes him look uncool. Soon, Naruto heard a distant thundering, and looked in the direction it was coming from. What he saw amazed him. There was a huge group of fangirls chasing him down the street. Naruto got an idea. He smirked and ran after Sasuke. Once he had caught up, Sasuke scowled at him. What do you want, Naruto? Naruto smiled at him, matching him pace for pace. Looks like you're having trouble with your fangirls. Sasuke's scowl deepened, and he considered punching Naruto in the face. Need some help getting rid of them. Sasuke almost stopped, before he remembered what he was running from. How exactly are you going to help? Naruto rolled his eyes and formed a ram seal as they rounded a corner, out of sight from everyone. Like this. Henge. Naruto was surrounded by a puff of smoke, before the smoke rolled off him to reveal a perfect copy of Sasuke. Naruto used one of Sasuke's smirks. Get out of here, I'll get rid of them. Sasuke nodded dumbly, and ran off to the only place he was safe from them. The Uchiha Manor. Naruto quickly pulled out some supplies he had gathered for a practical joke. Namely, a can of paint and an explosive note. Naruto quickly pried the can open and shoved the exploding note inside, resealing it just as the girls rounded the corner. They saw the man of their dreams and rushed forward. Naruto held up his hand in a motion that told them to stop, which they did before Naruto spoke. Have you taken in your surroundings? They had no clue what he was talking about and charged forward again. However, Naruto had expected this, and formed a seal which started the explosive note's timer. Naruto jumped between the walls and landed on the roof, just as the note exploded, sending paint everywhere. He could tell the girls had stopped, so he looked over at them. It was priceless. The entire alleyway was pure white, except for very human-shaped splotches where the girls had blocked the paint with their bodies. They clearly had no clue as to what had just happened, so Naruto decided to enlighten them. A ninja must always be aware of their surroundings. Seems you learned the hard way. With that, Naruto laughed darkly as he headed for the library, leaving the stunned girls behind. A short time later, at the library, Naruto ran to the library, hoping he wasn't too late. When he burst through the front door, he saw the Hokage and the librarian waiting for him. Naruto walked up to him. Sorry for keeping you waiting, Hokage-sama. The Hokage waved it off and motioned him to follow, which he did. Once the Hokage reached a door that was made of pure metal, he put his hands to it and muttered, Kai, and the door flashed a brilliant white before it opened. Once inside, the Hokage resealed the door and turned to Naruto. You can drop the henge, Naruto. Naruto slumped his shoulders and muttered Kai, releasing the henge. The Hokage gave Naruto a solemn look. What could you possibly want to know about Shinjutsu? Naruto sighed, deciding that telling a lie right now will only cause more trouble. I want to know about a particular seal that is also a Shinjutsu. The Hokage's eyes widened in surprise, knowing exactly which one the boy was talking about. Shikifujin. Naruto nodded, guessing that was what he was looking for. The Hokage took a puff of his pipe before expelling the smoke out the side of his mouth. I suppose we might as well start from the beginning. The Hokage took a seat and motioned for Naruto to take the seat next to him, which he did. He began telling Naruto how the Yondaime was a master of seals, and he even created his own major seal called the Shikifujin to deal with the Kyuubi. He had used it to seal it inside Naruto the day he was born, purposely leaving out the fact that Naruto was his son. Naruto took this hard, but it all made sense now. Every single bit of it. At the end of the explanation, Naruto turned to the Hokage. Old man, they're only making it harder for me to suppress the Kyuubi. The old man sighed before taking another drag. I know, Naruto, I know. Please, don't give in to them. Naruto sighed and stood up before transforming back into Sasuke, who he knew so well by now that he could do the henge without Sasuke standing in front of him. He turned back to the Hokage as he walked out the door once the Hokage had unsealed it. Thanks for that, Hokage-sama. No problem, Sasuke. With that, Naruto went back outside and ran home. The villager's looks of pure hatred and contempt hurt so much more now that he knew why. Once he got home, he huddled up against the wall of his bedroom and did something he hadn't done in a while. He cried. He cried himself to sleep, which came long after he got home. When Naruto woke up, he heard an unfamiliar drip. 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 He grumbled to himself about getting a plumber to fix it as he opened his eyes to see that this was not his home. It was some maze of dilapidated sewers. How the hell did I get here? Naruto heard a bone-chilling laugh, followed by a voice that could have frozen a man's heart cold. Why don't you come here and find out? Naruto slowly trudged towards the direction of the noise. After a while he felt he could not go any further. He turned a corner and saw a bright light down the corridor. With the last of the strength he had left, he walked into the light, only to reveal a giant cage with a single slip of paper saying, "Seal," holding it closed. At that point, a giant pair of eyes and a mouth full of serrated teeth appeared, grinning at him. So, you finally showed up, Naruto's mind knew instantly what this was and he fell on his butt, sending a small amount of water that covered the floor everywhere. Kyuubi. The demon smiled even wider. At least my container isn't totally stupid. I could have gotten worse, I guess. Naruto recovered slightly from the initial shock and got back up. He stared at the Kyuubi, without wavering, and uttered a single word. Why? The Kyuubi, for once, didn't have a response. The Kyuubi knew exactly what Naruto was asking, but didn't feel like going into detail right now. I'll tell you some other time. Right now, I need to tell you something, so listen up, and listen good kid, cause I'm only saying this once. Naruto listened to the Kyuubi, waiting for what he had to say. You have a hell of a life ahead of you. You will be hunted for me by some of the strongest humans in the world. Because I die if you do, I'm going to be your life support in a way. If you need it, just call me and I'll pump some chakra into you. Naruto nodded in understanding. The Kyuubi smiled at him. It's about time you went back, Kit. Naruto awoke to find that it was almost morning, so he crawled into bed, still puzzled by the Kyuubi's last words. He went to sleep in a complete daze. Next morning, Naruto had slept fitfully, images of the legendary demon fox flicking through his mind's eye as he slept. He woke with a start as he saw the fox coming towards him, grabbing him in his jaws and crushing down on him, completely mutilating his body, blood spraying everywhere. Naruto was hyperventilating and was bathed in a cold sweat. He shakily got out of the futon and stumbled into the shower, washing himself, before getting out and taking care of his other hygiene matters. He wandered into the kitchen. He was on autopilot as he boiled the water for some cup ramen. The only thing that his mind was focusing on was the disturbing conversation from last night. After Naruto had eaten, he went back to the bathroom to brush his teeth. Checking the alarm clock beside his bed, noticing he had about half an hour to get to the academy. Picking up his bag and keys, he stepped out the door and slipped his mask on, although this morning it was far more difficult than usual. By the time he got to the academy, he had managed to completely put his mask of the Dobi on, as he called it. He walked through the academy halls, into his home room. When he opened the door, he noticed, as per normal, everyone turned to see who it was and then turned back the second they saw the shock of yellow and orange, not giving a damn about the Dobi, which was perfectly fine by Naruto. As he slipped into his usual place, he saw that Sasuke had taken the seat next to him already, looking at Naruto and slipping him a note, which Naruto expertly hid from the view of everyone. He read it, noticing it as a very Sasuke way of saying thanks for yesterday, which turned out to come in the words of, "Not half bad, Dobi." Naruto nodded to him, indicating he understood and not to mention it. At this point, Naruto heard a group of high-pitched screams from his left, and turned to see the much-dreaded Sasuke fan club standing over him. Naruto did his normal routine as he winced at their scream and cat calls of things like, "How dare you sit next to Sasuke-kun?" and the like. However, everyone was surprised when Sasuke turned to them and scowled. "Let him sit where he wants. Do you have a problem with that?" The girls backed up at the tone that the object of their desires had shot them down with for doing something for their precious Sasuke-kun they believed was a favor. Eventually, all of the girls returned to their seats, and Naruto turned to Sasuke with a raised eyebrow, causing Sasuke to turn and look out the window, looking bored. "Now we're even." Naruto smiled and sat back. Just then, Iruka came into the class, announcing a history lesson on the Kyuubi. Naruto stiffened considerably, which a few people noticed, including Iruka. Iruka smiled sadly as he gave a look that said, "Please bear with me." However, Naruto barely suppressed his anger. By now, everyone could feel the absolute hatred rolling off Naruto and were staring at him in disbelief. Iruka sighed and walked to the front of the room and began the lesson. After a while, Naruto shot up and stormed out of the room. Iruka tried to stop him, however, Naruto turned back to him and growled at him. "Don't you ever discuss this subject in front of me again." With that, he slammed the door, leaving Iruka to try and suppress the students from causing an uproar. He decided a half-truth would suffice. Naruto has just found out yesterday that the Kyuubi killed both of his parents on the day of his birth. He's still taking it rather hard. Everyone saw Naruto in a new light. No wonder he was lonely. Sasuke seemed to have a rather hunted look on his face. He started conversing with no one in particular, although everyone heard him. He's lost everything. Just like me." Coming from Sasuke's mouth, it meant so much more. Everyone tried to maintain some semblance of a regular class. After class was let out, Sasuke was the first out, running off to try and find out where Naruto was. His fangirls were hot on his heels, however, Sasuke turned and glared at them with nothing but absolute hatred in his eyes. "Don't you damn girls have any tact? After what you heard today, do you really think Naruto would appreciate you hanging around him and me? Go home, and don't any of you dare follow me." With that, Sasuke went to start his search for the blonde-haired boy. Several hours later, out the front of the academy, Sasuke returned to the last place on the list he knew Naruto hung out, which was the swing in front of the academy. Luckily, the boy was there. Sasuke slowly approached him, causing Naruto to look at him with eyes full of pain, suffering and loneliness. Naruto formed a weak smile for Sasuke. "You felt it too, right? The pain of losing them." Sasuke nodded and sat against the tree. Naruto did one of his fake smiles to cover up his sadness, however Sasuke stared at him. "Drop the front. I've been watching you, and I know you're not who others think you are." Naruto's eyes widened and he smiled sadly at Sasuke. "Thank you." Sasuke gave a and looked at Naruto. What he saw was a reflection of him in the first few months after the clan slaughter. "Thank you. You're the first person to notice that I'm not the idiot I try and convince others I am." Sasuke smiled knowingly at him. "When you go through the pain we have, it's impossible not to see others that have gone through it, not matter what kind of mask they put on. Keep the mask up in public, however, when we're alone, I think we might as well drop the charade." Naruto nodded and they sat in silence, occasionally chucking comments at each other every now and then. After several hours, Sasuke got up, and gave a smile to Naruto. Not the usual cocky smirk, but the kind of smile one would give to their friends. Naruto smiled back at him as Sasuke turned to leave, holding a hand up in the air. "Catch you tomorrow at the academy, Naruto." Naruto waved back and decided that not all of life was bad. He slowly walked back to his apartment, before quickly changing into his sleepwear and going to sleep almost the second his head hit the pillow. 3 years later. Naruto and Sasuke had both benefited from the mutual understanding of the pains of their past. Naruto had even worked up the courage to tell Sasuke about the Kyuubi not long ago. Naruto was surprised to no end when Sasuke just seemed to take it into his stride as if it wasn't anything too far out of the ordinary. Today was the day of the academy graduation test. Sasuke had made a dare with Naruto that he drop the mask and show them what he was really capable of. When Naruto asked what the reward was if he did, Sasuke grinned evilly. "I'll buy you as much ramen as you want in one meal." Sasuke had found out long ago that Naruto's Achilles heel was ramen. Naruto took the bait perfectly and agreed to do it. When they came into the classroom and took their seats, Iruka called the roll, checking everyone was here. When he motioned everyone to follow him outside to the shuriken throwing area. Once they were assembled, Iruka motioned Sasuke forward, who with his usual cocky smirk, flicked his wrist, releasing the shuriken. All of them landed inside the targets on the log, all of them getting prefect bullseyes. Iruka motioned Naruto forward whose side, wondering if this was worth it. He flicked his wrist with the same ease as Sasuke had. To everyone's shock, the shuriken didn't miss by a mile like they normally would haste. They all landed perfectly in the bullseyes. Iruka was stunned, as were the rest of the class. Some of them started muttering think GS like, fluke, and lucky. Naruto was content to let the idiots think that, however he saw in Iruka's eyes that he understood that what Naruto had done was done with pure skill gained from years of endless practice, and had nothing to do with luck. After everyone else had completed the first test, Iruka walked back inside. He had them line up in front of him, and he announced the next test. "The next test is a henge test. You must henge into me. First, Uchiha Sasuke." Sasuke grumbled and stepped up, muttering, "Henge," and transformed into a perfect Iruka. Iruka nodded, before he looked to the next in line. Next, Uzumaki Naruto. Everyone knew Naruto sucked at henge, and there was no way to fluke this. As Naruto stepped up, he could feel almost everyone glaring at him, almost willing him to fail. Naruto half lazily muttered, "Henge," and he was surrounded by a veil of smoke. When it cleared, there was Iruka, and a perfect copy of him at that. The others looked astonished that Naruto hadn't attempted something stupid, like some of the perverted ninjutsus he was rumored to be creating. Naruto was surrounded by another cloud of smoke, and when it cleared there was the normal Naruto. He walked back to his usual seat, where Sasuke was sitting, purposely ignoring the stares. After the test came the test that everyone knew Naruto absolutely hated, the Bunshin test. Iruka told them to go into the next room one at a time as their names were called. Sasuke was called first, who came out a few moments later and showed his Hitai to Naruto with a quick flash, then disappeared. Naruto knew if he tried to do a Bunshin, he'd fail miserably, however, he'd prepared something else. Iruka popped his head in and called Naruto. "Uzumaki Naruto, you're up." Naruto went with a grin on his face that rivaled a fox's. People could hear his cry from next door as he announced his technique, however, it was not what they expected. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. They heard the sound of wood creaking and groaning under extreme stress before they heard the door shatter, and they ran outside to see that Naruto's clones were piled out the door on top of each other. Shikamaru was the first to pick up that something was amiss. There. Solid. Everyone noticed this as the clones poofed out of existence and they heard Iruka stutter, trying to find something to say. "Nah, Naruto." Naruto turned to Iruka. "What? Didn't I create enough? I can create more, if you want." Iruka madly failed his arms, indicating it was okay. "Naruto. That's a Junin level jutsu." Naruto nodded. "And I can't do regular Bunshin, so I just had to try for the next level up." Iruka waved him towards the table of the Hitai, where Naruto picked one with black cloth, and fastened it around his head. Naruto charged outside to see Sasuke waiting for him with a look of pure amusement on his face. You really didn't have to go that far to win the dare, you know. Naruto snickered and walked up to Sasuke, who fell into step beside him, as they both walked towards Ichiraku's for the prize Sasuke had promised Naruto. Next morning at the academy, Naruto turned up early that morning and took his regular seat next to Sasuke, who gave him a nod, which was his indication of good morning while they were in public. Naruto returned it, and then turned to the front of the class as Iruka walked in. Iruka started a long-winded speech about how life would be hard from now on and they had many trials ahead of them. He looked over his graduating class and then down at his clipboard. I will now announce the teams. Starting with Team 7, Uzumaki Naruto. Said student shot to attention at this. Iruka continued. Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto didn't contain his joy as he pumped the air and gave a yada off, causing everyone to look at him. Sasuke was happy with that as well. Iruka went and announced the last team member. And Haruno Sakura. Sakura jumped up with her own yada, while Naruto and Sasuke banged their heads on the desk in unison and groaned. Shikamaru looked at Iruka in question. Iruka-sensei, what's with putting the three strongest people on one team? Aren't they supposed to be balanced? Iruka nodded. And they are, Shikamaru. Although Naruto got the highest scores in the final exams, the placements take into consideration your entire year's mark, not just the tests. Even if Naruto came first in the final tests, he was still bottom of the class. Shikamaru nodded and went back to staring out the window, content with the answer. After Iruka had announced the other teams, he told them which rooms to wait in for their new Junin senseis. When Naruto heard the name of Cell 7's Junin, he groaned and slammed his head on the desk multiple times, causing Iruka to look at him. Is something wrong, Naruto? Naruto looked at Iruka with a look of hurt in his eyes. Did you really have to give us that guy? He's 2 hours late to everything that's not life-threatening. Iruka sighed, shaking his head. He personally asked to teach your cell, which Hokage-sama agreed to. Naruto just trudged out of the room. Sasuke followed him with the ever-loyal lap dog that was Sakura close behind. 2 hours later in Team 7's room, Naruto counted down the minutes and seconds before he turned to the door and pointed at it just as it was opening. You're late, Kakashi-sensei. Why the hell are you always so tardy? Kakashi walked in to reveal a man in navy blue pants and shirt with a Junin flak jacket over his shirt. He wore fingerless gloves that had metal plates on the back of the hands. He wore a mask that covered the majority of his face and all of his neck, and his hitai covered his left eye and he had a shock of silver hair standing up. He smiled in that oh-so-familiar irritating fashion, making Sasuke doubt his capacity while Sakura took her crush's example and doubted him. Kakashi looked at them before giving a, My first impression of you guys is. Naruto knew exactly what was coming, and answered for them. Annoying, right? You should really watch what you say, you sound like a hypocrite. Kakashi looked at Naruto and smiled lazily. Meet me on the roof. With that, Kakashi poofed out of existence and Team 7 followed him to the roof. Once they were there, he motioned to the steps and they took their seats. Kakashi leaned up against the railing, and folded his arms over his chest. Well, I need to get to know you guys first, so tell me your names, likes, dislikes, hobbies and dreams. Sakura didn't understand so she looked at her new sensei questioningly. Nay, sensei, why don't you go first? Kakashi nodded and started. My name is Hitaki Kakashi. My likes are none of your business. Naruto smiled and decided to toy with his new sensei. He means he likes to read little orange books. Kakashi continued. Neither are my dislikes. He means he doesn't like people who harm his precious books. My hobbies. Likes reading and collecting the books. As for my dream, You would never understand. He means he wants to star in the movie for his books and meet the author himself. Kakashi stared at the boy in interest. He apparently knew everything about him. He pointed to Naruto. Since you think you know so much about me, why don't you go? Fine. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. As for my likes and dislikes, those who deserve to know them already do. My hobbies are training, dreams. I have one, but if I told you, you'd piss your pants. Sakura suddenly saw that Naruto wasn't the bright bubbly boy she thought she knew. Kakashi turned to Sasuke. Right. You next, Uchiha. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. My likes and dislikes are none of your buisiness. My hobbies are training and getting stronger. As for my dreams, I have two. First is to kill a certain man. The other is to revive my clan. Naruto smiled knowingly while Sakura naturally thought it was cool. Naruto laughed mentally. How little that idiot actually knows. Kakashi turned to the girl. Right. You next. My name is Haruno Sakura. I like. Insert sideways glance at Sasuke here. I dislike Ino Pig. My hobbies. Another sideways look here, and my dreams. Sideways look at Sasuke with complimentary high-pitched squeal. Naruto and Sasuke groaned. Kakashi sighed mentally. Great. An Avenger, a mentally corrupted demon container and a love-sick puppy. I've got a hell of a lot of work to do. Kakashi reached into his pocket and pulled out two bells. Naruto had a fair idea of what was about to transpire. Right. We're going to do a test to see if you can keep the rank of genin. Naturally Sakura had to open her big mouth. Nani? But we already passed the genin graduation exam. Naruto sighed. That only proved we could perform the abilities. This will prove we know when to use them in a real-life situation. Kakashi nodded. Naruto was obviously smarter than he let on. The test will have a 66% failure rate. Those who do not pass will be sent to redo their training at the academy. Sasuke slapped a hand over Sakura's mouth to keep her from one of her screaming fits. Seriously, Sakura, learn when to shut up. Naruto stared at Kakashi. Let me guess, you're going to tell us not to eat breakfast, right, because we'll throw up. Kakashi's eyes narrowed. This guy's damn sharp. According to his grades, he was the Dobie of the class. Kakashi did his laid-back smile. Yup. Well, meet at the training grounds at 5 a.m. Yeah. With that, Kakashi poofed out of existence. Sasuke and Naruto got up, with Sakura dragging along behind Sasuke. Before Sakura could ask the question, Sasuke turned around. Don't. I'm tired of you fangirls asking me for dates. If you seriously think you're worth me taking out on a date, prove it. Prove to me that you are worth it. And tell them, never ask me again. Sakura felt her heart shatter at the harsh words that Sasuke used and fell to her knees. Naruto saw what she was about to do and sighed, asking Sasuke to wait for him. He went up to Sakura. Sakura, do you know why Sasuke says harsh things like that? Sakura shook her head. It's because he's scared. Scared that if he gets attached to more people, he'll lose them again like he did his clan. That's why he only makes attachments to people who can defend themselves against anything. By proving you're worth it, he meant prove you're as strong as he is. Personally, I'd say drop it. You have no idea what you're trying to get yourself into. Sasuke and I have led a dark past and well have our minds set on one goal only. After that, we have nothing to live for. Be careful what you wish for, Sakura. Sakura was shocked by the words. Sasuke. Scared? That couldn't be right. Naruto sensed this and laughed heartlessly. You would be scared shitless if a 13-year-old murdered your entire clan and then replayed it to you in your own mind. Sakura gasped. The Uchiha clan had been murdered by a 13-year-old. Naruto smiled at her, although the smile was devoid of emotions, and nodded. With that, he went back to Sasuke as they walked back to Ichiraku's for lunch. Next morning, 7:30 a.m. Naruto and Sasuke appeared at the training grounds half an hour after they knew Kakashi would be there. He stared at them. Why were you late? Naruto burst out laughing. You come 2 hours late every day and you call us late because we decided to show you what it feels like for once. Please. Kakashi sighed and pulled out a timer before placing it on a stump and set it. This will go off at noon. You have until then to get a bell. If you do not get a bell, you will be tied to the stump and watch the others eat. This had the desired effect on Sakura, whose stomach growled. However, Sasuke and Naruto smiled. Kakashi sighed. He'd really have to talk to these two about following orders. Go. All three of them body flickered away and Kakashi pulled out his famous little orange book and began reading. Naruto, who was with Sasuke, groaned and slapped his hand to his forehead. Sasuke looked somewhat disappointed. Naruto turned to Sasuke. Whatever you do, do not turn your back to him. Sasuke nodded, although Naruto could tell Sasuke didn't grasp what he meant. He's a pervert through and through. Turn your back to him, and he'll perform a move called Konohage Insen Taijutsu Ogi, Senengarashi. All it is a super ass poke. Sasuke's sweat dropped. However, Naruto had a plan and he began discussing it with Sasuke, who smiled evilly. Naruto took off his Hitai-8, catching the sunlight so it shone directly onto Sakura's face. Sakura decided they were indicating her to attack, so she charged at Kakashi. Not exactly what Naruto had in mind, but it'd do. Naruto nodded to Sasuke and created a Kage Bunshin, which he sent out to take Kakashi from head on. The Naruto clone decided to play dumb and make what appeared to be genin-level attacks, but in reality, he was holding back. He purposely let Kakashi get behind him and the real Naruto indicated to start their plan. You shouldn't let an enemy see your back multiple times, baka. True to Naruto's theory, Kakashi formed a Tora seal. The Naruto clone feigned being scared as Kakashi used the super ass poke. However, he did not realize until too late that Naruto and Sasuke were behind him, who had body flickered in while Sakura body flickered in front of him. You were saying, also, don't use your moves carelessly, or they'll be used against you, baka. Naruto quickly formed a Tora seal and proceeded to give Kakashi a taste of his own medicine. Konohage Insen Taijutsu Ogi, Senengarashi. Naruto launched Kakashi into the air while Sasuke and Sakura each jumped up and grabbed a bell while Kakashi was still trying to contemplate how Naruto knew one of his own motos. Kakashi looked up just in time to see the three genin laughing at Kakashi. Kakashi stood up and smiled. Right, let's go tie Naruto up. Naruto waggled a finger at Kakashi. I may not have gotten a bell, but I got something even better. Kakashi looked in horror to see his orange book in Naruto's hands. Kakashi checked his pouch to see that it was indeed missing. Naruto flipped it open and pulled his Hitai-8 over his left eye, doing a Kakashi impersonation. Kakashi smiled and held his hand out. Naruto looked at it and smiled. So, are you going to pass all of us? Kakashi sighed. Well, you did understand the true meaning of this test, which was teamwork. I've never passed a team before, because they were bakas who just followed my rules unquestioningly. So, Kakashi turned around and gave them a genuine smile. You pass. Naruto gave Sasuke a high five while Sakura gave her usual, yada. Kakashi continued smiling. It seems that Sasuke and Naruto get along perfectly, however, Sakura seems to be the odd man out, so to speak. But you were able to put your differences behind you and work together to beat me. They were all smiles as Kakashi waved them to the three bento boxes on the ground. Eat up, guys and girl. Starting tomorrow, we begin missions as Cell 7. Also remember one rule. They looked up at Kakashi, waiting for his rule. Those who don't listen to orders are scum, however, those who don't take care of their friends are lower than that. Remember that well. They nodded as they finished up their bento boxes and walked their separate ways. About a week later, in the mission office, Cell 7 had been doing a hell of a lot of stupid missions that weren't even fit for an academy student. Finally, after returning a very troublesome cat, as Shikamaru would have called it, the feudal lord's wife left after paying, and the Hokage looked through the mission listing. Let's see. Your next mission will be babysitting an elder's grandson, shopping at a nearby village, digging up sweet potatoes. No. The single word made the entire room look at Naruto, demanding an explanation. How the hell could you classify these as missions? I wouldn't even subject academy students to this. I'm sure, being the Hokage, you've realized by now that every single mission we've been assigned is easily doable by non-ninjas. Why bother squandering village resources like this? Everyone looked at Naruto, trying to find some flaw in his argument. However, it was perfect. Every single part of it was true. Iruka stood up to try and defend the Hokage, but the Hokage just motioned to sit back down. So, you think you can handle a real mission? Let's see. The Hokage shuffled through the papers before finding one in particular. What about a C-class mission to the wave? Naruto laughed mentally. This wasn't a C-class. The only person who would come to a ninja village from the wave would be to ask protection from Gato, making it at least B-class. Naruto saw that Sasuke had realized this as well. Naruto grinned and Kakashi nodded. We'll take it. The Hokage nodded. Then I'll introduce you to your client. You can come in now. The door opened to reveal a thick-set man with graying hair and beard. He also wore glasses and was obviously drunk. He looked at them and gave a, These are the people that you assigned to protect me. They look like super idiots, especially the one in orange. Naruto smiled. I could kill you in one of 7 different vital areas in under a second without you realizing. I'd suggest you reconsider that remark. The man stiffened up at this remark, instantly becoming sober. He sighed and nodded to the Hokage as he led them out of the mission office. When Naruto got out of earshot of the room, he called to the old man. I know the wave country is poor, but it's not a good idea to deceive the mission handlers about the mission's difficulty. The man stood ramrod straight and looked the boy in horror. He decided a get trip was in order. Well, I don't mind if you guys dump the mission. It'll be sad when my daughter and grandson dies. Naruto smiled. Well, why don't we have a little discussion then? Tell us as much as you know about the enemy and we'll adjust accordingly. If you don't tell us all you know, we will dump the mission, which we have every right to do so. The man nodded and began telling them about the Gato Corporation, who it was known to hire and its numbers, which was admittedly vague, but Naruto had expected this. Gato was known to keep his numbers and employees well hidden. For a week, they trudged towards the wave country encountering no resistance. Demon brothers aren't in this one. Finally, they got to a river where a boat was waiting. They walked towards the boat and got on. The man nodded. To their client. Tazuna, we've been expecting you. Are these the ninjas you brought? Tazuna nodded and the man in the boat started up the engine to get going. Soon, they entered a thick mist and the man cut the engines. Please be very quiet. Gato's men patrol this area, so from here on we have to row. They nodded, keeping their senses steeled. They managed to reach the shore without incident and they set out towards the main village of the wave. Naruto felt a wave of killer intent directed towards him and he charged forward, tackling Sakura and Tazuna to the ground. Sasuke and Kakashi were quick enough to react by themselves. Naruto looked at the Getant sword that had embedded itself in a nearby tree. Naruto smirked. I'd recognize that sword anywhere. A disembodied voice came from around them. Oh, recognize me. 3 guesses. I only need 1. Former member of the Hidden Mist 7 Shinobi Swordsman, Momochi Zabuza, also known as the Demon of the Mist. Wanted mainly for a failed assassination attempt on the Mizukage. Considered an upper A, bordering on lower S rank missing nin. Zabuza laughed. You're good kid. It's unusual for a genin to know so much about missing nins. I have to know my enimes if I want to live. One of them happens to be a former acquaintance of yours. And who would that be? Hosagake. Kisame. Zabuza paused for a moment, before laughing. You got yourself some powerful enemies, kid. You must have severely pissed off Kisame to make him an enemy of yours. So, since you have Kisame as an enemy, I would have assumed you've trained yourself to be able to at least hold your own for a while. Naruto laughed, continuing with the pre-battle banter. Yeah, I trained alright. You would be a good measuring stick to see how far I've come. Just then, Zabuza's body flickered to stand on the handle of his sword and looked down at the group. Naruto smiled with nothing but confidence in his eyes. Everyone else was either shaking or, in Kakashi's case, planning what to do. Zabuza stared at the kid who had spoken to him. You don't look like much, kid. Naruto smiled. Want to find out if that's true? Zabuza smirked and pulled the sword out of the tree. Kakashi saw that Naruto was about to charge him, and put a hand on his shoulder. Naruto, he's out of your league. Everyone, get in formation and protect Tazuna. Naruto sighed and got in formation. Kakashi decided to lift his headband and end this quickly. What Sasuke saw shocked him. Is that the Sharingan? Naruto nodded. It's not his, per se. He can't use it to the full potential because he's not an Uchiha. Apparently, he came back from a mission with his left eye slashed and he had a Sharingan instead of the normal eye. Also, his teammate who was an Uchiha didn't come back from the mission. That's all I could find out. Sasuke nodded and watched as Zabuza pulled the sword out of the tree and body flickered to stand on top of the water nearby before announcing his technique. Ninpu, Kurigakur no Jutsu. The mist slowly surrounded them and separated them from Kakashi. Naruto smiled. He knew what was coming next, and decided to spoil the mood. Let me guess, Zabuza. The 8-point speech, right? Do you ever come up with anything original? Zabuza said nothing. At that point, they felt a burst of chakra and the mist around them cleared, revealing Kakashi surrounded by an aura of chakra. Naruto could sense the fear rolling of Sasuke in waves and turned to him. Sasuke, that is exactly how Zabuza wants you to react. Don't forget, I'm here. He won't get to you without a fight. Sasuke nodded, regaining his resolve and steeled himself. At that point, Zabuza appeared in the middle of them. I wonder if you can. This is it. With that, Zabuza swung his sword around, but to everyone's surprise, Naruto jumped in the way of the sword and stabbed his kunai into Zabuza's stomach before he could complete the swing. Naruto watched as a clear liquid came out of Zabuza's wound in a steady stream. Eventually, the entire clone turned to water and fell to the ground. Zabuza appeared behind Naruto. You're good for a genin, I'll give you that. However, you won't live through this. Zabuza cleaved Naruto in half only to find it poofed out of existence. Zabuza's eyes widened. Kage Bunshin, Kakashi appeared behind Zabuza with a kunai to his neck. None of us are to be underestimated, Zabuza. This is the end for you. Another Zabuza appeared behind Kakashi, sword poised to strike. Is it, Kakashi? Kakashi stiffened in surprise before he destroyed the Mizu Bunshin in front of him and ducked in time to avoid the horizontal swipe, only to receive a swift kick to the chin, sending him flying into the river. Zabuza ran at Kakashi, jumping over the caltrops and into the water. Kakashi broke the surface and looked at the water in worry. What's with this water? It's heavy for some reason. Zabuza's body flickered behind Kakashi and formed a short set of hand seals giving off a HMPH. Baka. Suoro no Jutsu. Kakashi was immediately trapped in a sphere of water. You're annoying, Kakashi. I'm going to deal with the runts first. Kakashi looked at them in horror. Take Tazuna and run. Forget me. Naruto sighed. Do you still have so little faith in us, sensei? I told you to run. That's an order. No. Kakashi turned to Naruto, realizing he had taken his lesson to heart. Zabuza formed a muzzy bunchen and had it walk toward the genin and Tazuna. The clone laughed. The three of you have hit on as if you think you're ninja. A ninja is someone who's gone through numerous life and death situations. In other words, you can call yourself a ninja when you appear in my bingo book. What would you know of life and death? Everyone turned to Sasuke and Naruto, who were shaking in barely suppressed rage. Sasuke looked up at Zabuza with pure hatred in his eyes. What would you know about what it's like to have your entire clan murdered by your 13-year-old brother and then have to watch your relatives' deaths over and over for 72 hours with a Sharingan, huh? What the hell would you know what it's like to be beaten as a 5-year-old child? Who couldn't protect himself from an entire village of ninja just for being who and then refused service at the hospital when someone brought you in out of pity, suffering from a coma and severe internal damage every time it was your birthday. You don't know jack shit about pain. Zazuza saw them quivering in pure rage. They obviously weren't lying. He smiled at them. So both of you have obviously seen pain that only the worst of us are subjected to. You may be able to call yourselves ninja, but what about the girl, With that, Zabuza charged at the girl, knocking her forehead protector off her head and sending her flying back. The Hittite spun through the air before landing on the ground. Zabuza stomped on it, grinding it further into the ground. She's obviously led a sheltered life, growing up with parents and friends. She has no right to call herself a ninja. Not until she does something like I had to pass the genin exams of the Hidden Mist. Naruto scowled. You mean where you were paired up upon entering the academy, and you had to study from the same book, eat from the same bowl and sleep in the same bed, and for the graduation exam, you were forced to fight each other to the death. Zabuza smiled behind his bandaged mouth. Exactly. Until she is forced to kill someone, she will never be able to understand what being a ninja means. Sakura shakily got up, trying to recover from the pain. Naruto turned to Sasuke. Want to try our luck? Sasuke smirked and they both charged at the clone with abnormal speed for genins. The clone managed to fight them off. Naruto smiled. Sasuke, time for plan B. Want to try that new combo we've been working on? Sasuke nodded. Let's go. Naruto formed a mass of cage bunchins and dogpiled the Zabuza clone, however they were torn off and destroyed, which was exactly what Naruto wanted. One of Naruto's clones covered the real Naruto as he hinged into a Fuma Shuriken, which the clone caught in his bag. Pretending to open his bag and look for something, the Naruto clone chucked the folded pair of Fuma Shurikens to Sasuke, who caught them. Once he'd opened them, he jumped into the air and threw them at the Zabuza clone, only they missed him and continued on towards the real Zabuza. Oh, going for me this time. A petty attack like that won't work. Zabuza caught the shuriken only to see a second one hiding in its shadow. Nor will that. The Fuma Shuriken continued past Zabuza, although Naruto and Sasuke smiled and spoke just loud enough to be heard by Tazuna and Sakura. Fuma Shuriken Henge combo, success. Just then, the still airborne Fuma Shuriken was surrounded by a cloud of smoke revealing the real Naruto, who threw a kunai at the real Zabuza's head. Zabuza had two options. Cop the kunai full in the face or move out of the way and cancel the prison. Choosing the latter, he pulled his hand out and almost dodged the kunai whizzing past his head, making a small gash just beneath his eye. Zabuza started spinning the first Fuma Shuriken, preparing to decapitate the kid as he fell helplessly towards the water. However, just as he was about to release it, Kakashi blocked the Fuma Shuriken with the metal plates on the back of his gloves. Naruto fell into the water and broke the surface, smiling his foxy grin. Sasuke smiled. When you got caught in that prison, we didn't have a choice of wanting to run or not. If we had, Zabuza would have killed you and then picked us off at will. You're the crux of this team at the moment. Both Naruto and I thought through several different ways of freeing you, and we both realized that our combo we made just before we left for this mission was our best chance. The massive cage bunchins was nothing more than a necessary diversion needed to hide the true combo, which consisted of 2 Fuma shurikens. We knew you'd catch one and there was a big chance that you'd let the other one go past since both your hands were occupied, so the second one was Naruto in a henge, who exploited that weakness. Kakashi smiled at them. Good job. I'm proud of you. I wouldn't have expected any less from a former prankster and a shuriken specialist. You've both grown exponentially. Kakashi and Zabuza sprang back and started forming seals. The long seal chain ended in Tori as they both announced the jutsu. Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu. A pair of dragons made entirely out of water rose out of the water and twisted around each other in a double helix shape, before lunging at one another. They clashed several more times before the jutsu was released, causing a shower to fall over the area. Kakashi and Zabuza sprang forward and locked blades, Zabuza with his sword and Kakashi with a kunai. They sprung back from the deadlock and stared at each other before running in half a circle. When Zabuza stopped, so did Kakashi. Zabuza prepared to do the ninpu, Kurigakure no Jutsu again, and found that Kakashi was again mirroring his movements perfectly. Zabuza lowered his raised arm 3/4 of the way, mirrored by Kakashi, and began thinking. This guy, my movement is being perfectly. Kakashi finished his thought out loud for him. Predicted by him. Nani. He read what I was going to say in my mind. Zabuza formed a Tori seal, which Kakashi mirrored. Damn it. This guy has such unpleasant eyes, right? Zabuza formed a Tora seal and laughed. What you're doing is copying, nothing original. They both said the next sentence in unison. You can't beat me, you monkey. Zabuza's bloodshot eyes widened and he began forming hand seals. I'll make sure you can never open that copycat mouth of yours again. Just as Zabuza got to the last few seal, he noticed a Shao DW behind Kakashi. That's me. Is it Genjutsu? This gave Kakashi the break he needed to finish the last 3 hand seals and perform the jutsu. Sweden. Daibikufu no Jutsu. Zabuza was scared out of his mind. Nani. This can't be. The water that had been collecting itself into a ring around Kakashi shot forward in a torrent of water and blew Zabuza away into the current, leaving him to scream all the way. Eventually, the torrent subsided, leaving Zabuza pinned against a tree. 4 kunais flew at him and embedded themselves into him, 1 in each limb. Zabuza looked up into the tree to see Kakashi staring at him. This is the end. Why? Can you see the future? Yeah, your future is death. As Kakashi had predicted, 2 Senbon needles flew out of the scrub and punctured Zabuza in the neck. Zabuza dropped to the ground, lifeless. By this time, the others had arrived. Kakashi went to the body of Zabuza and felt for a pulse. When he confirmed there was none, he looked at the masked boy. It was true. He did die. Thank you. I've been hunting Zabuza for months. The boy with the Anbu mask walked up to the body and began picking it up, however Naruto stopped him. You're a hunter nin, right? The boy stopped and looked at him. That is correct. Why do you ask? If you're a hunter nin, then do your job properly. A hunter nin is required to destroy the body of the target exactly where the body falls in battle. Put him down and destroy him. All you need is his head for proof, not the entire body. The hunter nin tensed before he lopped Zabuza's shoulder over him and body flickered away before anyone had a chance to stop him. Naruto cursed loudly. Damn it, I knew something was up with that guy. At that moment, Kakashi collapsed, making everyone run over to him. Naruto checked him and found he was surviving on practically no chakra. He's suffering chakra exhaustion. We need to get him to a place to rest soon or he could die. They nodded and turned to Tazuna. My village isn't far from here. If you can carry him, I'll lead the way. They nodded. Sasuke and Naruto supported one shoulder each and helped carry him while Sakura covered Tazuna. Next morning, at Tazuna's house, Kakashi awoke to the sound of seagulls crying, sunlight streaming in his window and the smell of salt thick in the air. He moved his head to the side slowly and saw Naruto looking over a book with Sasuke and Sakura. Naruto turned his head to Kakashi. Morning, Kakashi-sensei. When Naruto said that, they heard footsteps approach the door. When they reached the door, it slid open to reveal a woman with long black hair and a pink jumper with red highlights. She smiled. I'm glad to see you're awake, Kakashi-san. How are you feeling? Kakashi groaned. I used my Sharingan far too much yesterday. I'll take a while to recover. Sasuke nodded. Due to the level of chakra exhaustion he's suffering from, I'd say about a week. Kakashi nodded. So, what are you three studying? Sakura looked at him with a look of concern in her eyes. We were studying the weapon that boy used and its uses. Apparently, it's a type of needle that is used for acupuncture healing, but it can be used to kill if you have perfect accuracy and a complete understanding of the human anatomy. Also, it seems that people who have that level of knowledge and skill can just as easily put someone in a near-death state. Kakashi-sensei. Zabuza is still alive. Tazuna gasped at this, but Kakashi nodded. I'm amazed you three were able to come to that conclusion, however, it is correct. Zabuza is still alive. Luckily for us, putting someone in a near-death state no matter how efficient they are will still cause a massive amount of strain on the target's body. Zabuza won't be able to use his body for about a week either. Kakashi smiled at them. Not only have you three grown in skill, but also in knowledge. I'm proud of you. Naruto smiled. Seems things are starting to get interesting. No, they're not. They turned to see a small boy in a green one piece that stopped just above the knees. Beneath that was a beige shirt. He was also wearing a broad-brimmed hat with two navy blue stripes. Naruto looked at him. Who are you? Tazuna bent down and put his hand on the boy's head. This is my grandson, Inari. Inari looked at them in contempt. Why did you hire them? They're just going to die. Naruto laughed. If you think I'm going to die to these chumps, you have another thing coming. Sasuke smirked. Naruto's right. None of us will die. We all have goals in life that we swore to complete, and we can't die until they are complete. We've been through a hell of a lot. A stupid Junin is nothing. You guys think too much of yourselves. Anyone who goes against Gato will die. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Let me tell you something. Every single person who has underestimated us, no matter what rank they were, have either died or been completely humiliated. Genin, Chunin, Junin, Anbu, they're all the same. Those who underestimate us will pay. Sasuke nodded in agreement, however, Inari smirked. You have no idea what you're up against. Just go home. With that, Inari turned around and left the room. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He's got something big shoved up his. Sakura clamped a hand over Naruto's mouth when she saw Tsunami and Tazuna's reactions. Tazuna sighed. I have to apologize for my grandson's behavior. Ever since he lost his dad, he's been like that. Naruto shook his head in disbelief. Kakashi decided to lighten the mood. Well, I think you three need to do some training to help you in the upcoming fight. Naruto looked down at Kakashi. What practical training can you show us in your state? Kakashi smiled and pulled a pair of crutches that had been laid beside his bed to him, as he slowly got up. I'll show you. They followed Kakashi out into the woods until he faced three trees. Kakashi turned to face them. Right. You three are going to climb trees. Sakura looked at Kakashi in doubt, but Naruto and Sasuke knew where this was going. Without your hands. Sakura's eyes widened in disbelief. Naruto turned to Kakashi. Nay, Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke and I can already do this. We learned it about a week before we came here. We're trying to do the water walking exercise now. Kakashi nodded. Then show me. Naruto and Sasuke walked up to the trees and concentrated their chakra before placing a foot on the tree and walking up. They both decided to hang upside down on a branch for effect. Sakura was boggling at them as if they'd grown an extra head. Kakashi, on the other hand, smiled. Okay, you two. After I explain this to Sakura, I'll help you with the water walking exercise. They nodded and dropped to the ground, doing a neat backflip and landing gracefully on the soft kaptet of leaves. Kakashi turned to Sakura and explained the theory behind the exercise. The hell, I'm going to type it out here. Sakura steeled herself and ran at the tree, and to everyone's surprise, got up first go. However, upon reconsidering Sakura's abilities, which centered around perfect chakra control, it really was no surprise. Kakashi led them to a nearby lake and began teaching them the theory behind the waterwalking exercise. By the end of the day, they had all managed to be able to at least walk across the lake at brisk pace. Kakashi decided to call it a day and they returned to Tezuna's house for dinner. Next morning, on the bridge, Sasuke, Naruto and Sakura were patrolling the bridge for any signs of enemies. At about midday, Tezuna called everyone to the middle of the bridge for a break. They talked with each other while eating. Eventually, one person stood up. He looked at Tezuna. Tezuna-san, I can't keep working. Gichi. Why? Tezuna, I've known you for a long time, but if I keep building this bridge, Gato will come after me, too. Everything will lose meaning if you die. Why don't we stop building this bridge? Everyone began muttering before Suna turned away. We can't do that, Gichi. This is our bridge. All our hopes rest on this bridge. Distribution and transportation to this poor country, which has few resources, will increase. But we'll die if we continue. No, you won't. Not with us here. They turned to see the three ninja looking at them. To you, we may just be a bunch of kids you hired to help, but to us, a mission is a mission, and we complete each and every mission with our full efforts. None of you will die while we're around. They nodded before they turned back to Tezuna, who sighed, taking off his hard hat. Guys, take an extended lunch break. Don't push yourselves too hard. The day wore on as Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura kept their patrol of the bridge up. At night, they studied scrolls they had brought with them. This routine kept going for a week until the evening before Zabuza and Kakashi were supposed to make a full recovery. They were enjoying their dinner, wondering why Naruto and Sasuke were out training for so long when the door opened and they came limping in, supporting one another. They smiled at the group. Sorry we're late. We were inventing a new combo. Kakashi smiled. No problem. Take a seat and eat up. Tezuna sighed. I've been meaning to ask you a question for a while now. Why did you keep going with this mission when you worked out I lied about the difficulty of the mission? Kakashi folded his hands in front of him. Not doing the right thing when you know it is the coward's way. There are no weak soldiers under a valiant commander. Naruto smiled. Those are the teachings of our previous Hokage, the Yondaime. Inari started crying, causing everyone to stare at him. He stood up and slammed his fists on the table. Why are you trying so hard that you end up like that? You can't beat Gato's men even if you train. No matter how hard you try with those good-looking words, you can't beat him. Sasuke and Naruto stood, towering over the boy. Say that again, you spoiled brat. I dare you. Everyone turned to them. Naruto growled out. What the hell would you know? You're spoilt. You lost your dad, so what? You still have some family members left. I would kill almost anyone I had to have a single family member. Do you want to know what we went through? Huh? Sasuke slammed his fist on the table, causing it to crack. Both of us have no family left. My entire clan was murdered by my 13-year-old brother who used a technique to force me to rewatch him killing the entire clan for 3 days straight. Naruto here never had a family. His mother died giving birth to him and his father died fighting a goddamn demon to save a village who would kill him the first chance they got if it wasn't for our current Hokage threatening anyone who harms him with death. On top of that, the 9 most powerful people in the world are hunting him for sport, one of who is my brother. You don't understand what true pain means. So you can just keep crying like the drama queen you are. At this, Inari backed up and ran from the room, slamming the door behind him. Tsunami had no idea that these boys managed to put on such brave faces despite what they went through. She began to apologize to them, but Naruto held up a hand. Save it. I don't want pity or sympathy, neither does Sasuke. With that, they left to go to their rooms for the night, leaving the others to think about what had happened. Next morning, Naruto and Sasuke woke to find a note that the others had gone to the bridge and to meet them there. Naruto jumped out of bed, which woke Sasuke. Sasuke looked at the note and quickly got changed. They both ran downstairs and waved goodbye to Tsunami. When they were flying through the trees, Naruto noticed slash marks on a group of trees. He motioned for Sasuke to follow him to the area, and when they got there, they saw a freshly killed boar with slash marks all over it. Naruto looked at Sasuke. Go on ahead, I'll catch up after I take care of them. Sasuke nodded and the split up. Sasuke heading for the bridge while Naruto headed back to the house. Naruto arrived back just in time to see Inari charging blindly at 2 Rouge ninjas. Just as they were about to unleash their sword attacks, Naruto used a kawarimi to replace Inari with a log. Naruto laid Inari on the ground. Inari, although your attack would have gotten you killed, it gave me the cover I needed to save you. Watch how real ninjas fight. Inari nodded dumbly as the 2 ninjas charged at him. Naruto threw 2 shuriken at them which they deflected with minimum effort. Those sorts of attacks won't work against us Gaki. Naruto smiled. Won't it? They turned around in time to see that the shurikens were actually clones of Naruto, who released the henge and gave them a roundhouse kick to the head, knocking them out. Once he'd tied them up, Naruto turned to Inari. Inari, I need you to do me a favor. Inari looked up at Naruto. Once you take your mum inside, get the villagers to come to the bridge with whatever weapons they can find. Gato and his men will die today. I'm counting on you. With that, Naruto waved and sped off to the bridge while Inari pulled Tsunami back inside and ran off to get the villagers. Back at the bridge, Kakashi was in a stalemate with Zabuza, while Sasuke was just beginning to experience Haku's Gekgenkai. At that point, Naruto threw a shuriken and scored a direct hit on Haku's mask. Naruto pressed his advantage and charged at Haku, stunning everyone. However, Haku was able to get back inside the mirror just in time. Naruto didn't expect this and plowed through the mirror, which promptly replaced itself. Naruto looked at Sasuke. Have you managed to work out how this thing works yet? Sasuke shook his head. Just as they got to their feet, Haku appeared in all of the mirrors, surprising Naruto. Soon after, they were peppered with a shower of Senbon needles, causing them to scream in agony. Kakashi looked in their direction when he heard the sound, causing Zabuza to laugh. No one has ever survived Haku's Gekgenkai. Those kids have had it. Kakashi looked at Zabuza square in the eye. No, they'll live. What makes you say that? Sasuke is one of the 2 last surviving members of Konoha's Uchiha clan, and Naruto is also the container for the Kyuubi no Kitsune. They will not lose. At the description of what Naruto was, Zabuza stared at Kakashi in disbelief. What did you say? You heard me, Zabuza. They won't lose. Zabuza was about to turn his back on Kakashi and deal with the punks, but Kakashi stopped him. You shouldn't turn your back on an opponent. Zabuza sighed. Let's continue then. Back in the room of ice mirrors, Naruto decided to try something. Sasuke, watch him closely. Sasuke nodded as Naruto formed the hand seal for Kage Bunshin, creating a clone for each mirror. Sasuke stared at the clones, trying to see how he attacked. The clones were defeated before one of them could reach a mirror, and the real Naruto fell back to the ground, coming to a stop beside Sasuke. Naruto looked up at him questioningly, to which Sasuke shook his head. Naruto stood up. Again. Naruto formed the seal and sent the clones at the mirrors. Sasuke concentrated on a blob of water that was floating in midair, and saw that it was disrupted by something twice. Naruto crashed back to the floor, and looked at Sasuke. Sasuke didn't make any movements this time, which Naruto had by now understood as an, "I'm not sure." Again, Naruto sent another wave of clones, however, this time, Sasuke kicked water into the air, and watched the water intently. He saw the water being parted and moved as if something was flying through the water. Once Naruto landed, he saw a slight nod, which wasn't a full, "Yes, I saw him," but more of a, "I definitely saw something." Naruto formed another wave and sent them, while Sasuke formed his own technique. The clones were easily dispatched while Sasuke used his Kaden Jutsu on a seemingly empty space. Once Naruto fell back to the ground, he stared at Sasuke. Sasuke pointed to a mirror, and Naruto saw that the boy's pants had been singed. They tried several times to get out, however, each time they failed. Finally, Naruto pumped chakra into his feet to increase his speed, but he was peppered with a bunch of Senbon needles, causing him to fall to the floor. Sasuke went to kneel beside Naruto. "Naruto, are you okay? Can you stand?" Naruto tried to get up, but fainted before he could even get onto his hands and knees. Sasuke looked around. Sasuke stood up, and Haku appeared in the mirror in front of him, pulling his hand back in preparation to throw the needles. Sasuke, however, picked up one of the many on the floor and parried the attacks before slumping back to his knees. Sasuke looked at Naruto. "Naruto, you have to get up. He'll kill us." Naruto slowly started getting up. Haku launched another round of needles from all mirrors, however, Sasuke not only covered from himself, but for Naruto as well. However, Naruto fainted from exhaustion and blood loss. Haku launched a round at Naruto's prone body, but Sasuke bent down, picked him up and powered his jump with chakra, missing a rain of needles by seconds. Haku stared at Sasuke, or more directly, his eyes. The irises were blood red. In his left eye, he had one mark, while his right eye had two. Haku decided to end this, and so launched an attack at Naruto's body. Sasuke, however, took the attack for Naruto before throwing Haku out of the way. Naruto opened his eyes to see Sasuke standing in front of him, barely clinging to life. Naruto stared at Sasuke in horror. "Sasuke, why? Neither of us can afford to die. We still both need to kill them. I could have survived that. Why?" Sasuke's lips formed the ghost of a smile. "I didn't want to see my adopted brother die." Naruto looked up at Sasuke in both admiration and horror. "You think I'm a brother?" Sasuke nodded as he reviewed all of his memories of Naruto before falling backwards into Naruto's arms. Sasuke looked at Naruto. "I'm sorry, Ototo. You'll have to kill them. For me." Naruto hugged Sasuke. "Don't say that. Neither of us are going to die yet. Sasuke, I can't go on without you. I have nothing left, except you. Please, don't die." Sasuke tried to put a hand on Naruto's face, but didn't make it. "Naruto, don't die until you kill them. If you don't, no one can." With that, Sasuke gave up his struggle for life. Naruto stared in disbelief at his friend and adoptive brother. He couldn't die. It was physically impossible. He hugged Sasuke to him and started weeping before letting out a howl of pure anguish. Haku merged back into the mirror. "Is this the first time you've seen a friend die? He was a ninja worthy of respect. How could you? I have nothing left. He was my last friend. My only friend. You bastard. With that, Naruto decided it was time. Oi, Kyuubi. Sure thing, Kit. Steam started to surround Naruto, which caught Haku's attention. The steam surrounding Naruto suddenly exploded into a wave of blood-red chakra. Naruto let Kyuubi take control of him. Naruto's body started to undergo a transformation. Naruto's nails grew into claws, his hair became unruly, his whisker marks turned into 3 dark slashes and his hues were blood red instead of the normal cerulean blue. The wounds on Naruto's body started regenerating, and the needles ejected themselves from his body. Naruto looked up at Haku with bloodlust radiating off him. Everyone on the bridge felt the chakra and felt as it blasted the area around them. They heard what they assumed was Naruto's voice, however, it was very different from the normal Naruto. You bastard. I'm gonna kill you. The chakra gained more force as Naruto charged at Haku, deflecting the needles with a wall of chakra. Haku tried in vain to attack Naruto a few more times before Naruto caught his wrist, snapping the bones. Haku tried to hold back the force of pure evil emanating from the boy, but failed miserably. Naruto pulled his other fist back and charged chakra into it before slamming it into Haku's face, sending the boy didn't stop as the remaining ice mirrors shattered. He charged at Haku and proceeded to rip his body apart. Remember, Naruto hadn't seen Haku's face in my FIC, so he had no idea who it was. Naruto turned round and stared directly at Zabuza. You're next, shithead. Before Kakashi could stop Naruto, Naruto charged at Zabuza, who was being held down by Kakashi's ninja dogs. Naruto charged chakra into his fist and slammed it through Zabuza's chest. Sakura stared in horror at Naruto. This wasn't the Naruto she knew. Naruto turned back to the end of the bridge and saw Gato and his mine there, watching. Fresh meat. Naruto charged at the people, slicing a path through them to get to Gato at the back. Naruto smiled sadistically at him. Die, scumbag. Naruto grabbed Gato's neck and crushed both his windpipe and spine, already dead. Naruto turned to the mercenaries. I haven't had a good feed in 12 years. This will be a nice appetizer. The men started backing up, but Kyuubi-controlled Naruto didn't give them the chance. He started ripping into them, pulling arms and legs off, putting his hand through their chests, and used other sadistic methods to kill them. By now, Sakura, Kakashi and Tazuna were mortified at what Naruto was doing. Naruto finished killing the last one and slowly regained control of his body. He slumped to his hands and knees, as he saw what he had just done. He threw up and began convulsing badly, causing Kakashi to run over to him. Kakashi saw that Naruto was suffering from severe psychological trauma, which really wasn't surprising. Kakashi gathered Naruto up and ran back to Sakura. Sakura, get Sasuke. We're going to the hospital. Kakashi and Sakura ran past the amassing group of villagers who had arrived with weapons like Naruto had asked for, and were shocked to see a blood-soaked Naruto convulsing violently in Kakashi's arms, while Sakura was carrying Sasuke close behind him. They understood when they saw the state the bridge was in and looked in absolute horror at the scene of carnage that was worse than any nightmares they had had before. Tazuna dispersed them, and went to check on the Konoha ninjas. Next morning, apparently, Sasuke had only been in a near-death state. As soon as he was able to, he rushed to see Naruto, who was sweating profusely and shivering, saying incoherent words. Sasuke looked to Kakashi for an explanation. Sasuke, when Naruto saw you die, he went berserk. He killed Haku, then Zabuza, and then killed over 200 thugs as well as Gato in under 2 minutes. When he came back to his senses, he saw what he had done and has been like this ever since. Sasuke looked at Kakashi in shock. He turned to Naruto, who was still convulsing. Sasuke laid a hand on Naruto's, which instantly seemed to have an effect. Although Naruto didn't stop convulsing completely, the spasms died down considerably. Kakashi noticed this, and decided that it would be best to head back to Konoha, as the medical adequacy of this hospital was nowhere near up to scratch. Sasuke, I need you to carry Naruto back the way. I'm sorry if it's a burden, but. Sasuke shook his head. It's fine, I understand. I hate to see Naruto like this. Sasuke lifted Naruto off the bed, and walked out of the room to see that Sakura was waiting for them. Kakashi nodded to her and they walked out of the Waves Hospital. Once they had collected the payment, they left for Konoha. 2 weeks later, once Team 7 got back from the wave, Naruto had been taken directly to the hospital for a week of intensive physiological treatment. Naruto's condition had slowly improved, and about the end of the week, Naruto woke up for the first time. The hospital staff didn't want him in there any longer than absolutely necessary, so they falsified Naruto's files and discharged him several hours after he woke up. After Naruto woke up, he was requested to immediately come to the Hokage's office. Once there, the Hokage told Naruto that he would not be allowed to leave the village for several weeks until they confirmed his mental stability. Naruto was left to attend regular team training, so he walked with Sasuke to the training area. To their surprise, Kakashi was there waiting for them. He smiled at them, in particular, Naruto. How are you feeling, Naruto? Naruto's face was blank when he answered. Okay, I guess. Kakashi nodded, pulling out 3 slips of paper and handing it to them. Naruto looked at it. Chunin exam. Kakashi nodded. I think all 3 of you are ready for it. Remember, take care of yourselves. As a final note, entry is voluntary. If you want to enter, sign it and turn up to room 301 tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Catch you round. With that, Kakashi poofed out of existence, leaving Team 7 to sort out what to do. 6:30 a.m. next morning. Team 7 met up outside the academy and walked in. They pushed through a throng of other Chunin hopefuls to the front and stared at the spectacle. Sasuke smirked. What kind of corny genjutsu is this? This is floor 2. Move. The 2 people guarding room 301 smiled. Seems one team is up to scratch. Yup. This is a genjutsu. The sign above the door swirled to reveal it was indeed 201. Sasuke gave his usual confident smirk. Naruto, Sakura, you both noticed it too, right? They both nodded. One of the Chuninins guarding the door smiled. Then let's see if you notice this. The Chunin and Sasuke went to kick, however, Naruto charged in and grabbed the Chunin, hurling him against the wall with a look of pure rage on his face. Try that again, Tem, and I'll kill you. Everyone backed off as Team 7 walked past, up the next set of stairs to the 3rd floor. When they were there, they heard a shout from behind them. Oi, you with the blonde hair. Wait. Naruto stopped and saw a green spandex wearing boy with a bowl cut and super eyebrows. The boy flipped over the railing and landed on the floor with them. I am Rock Lee. I would like to know who you are. Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. Lee smiled. Would you like to fight? Naruto stopped breathing. He turned around and continued walking. Lee had no clue what was going on. Are you running? Naruto stopped. If you value your life, then leave. If we fight, I may be unable to control myself. If that happens, I can guarantee your death. Sasuke nodded. I'd take his advice. I've seen what he can do. He's out of your league. Lee left to go back to his teammates while Team 7 walked up to the door to see Kakashi standing there. He smiled at them in that infuriatingly laid-back fashion. Good to see you're all here. Since all 3 of you turned up, I can let you in. Sakura raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, Kakashi-sensei? If one of you had not come, I would have had to turn the other 2 away, as this can only be taken in 3-man cells. Since all 3 of you are here, you can go. I wish you luck. With that, they passed Kakashi and pushed open the door. What they saw they didn't expect. Over 100 people staring at them. As they walked in the door, They heard a squeal as a shock of platinum blonde hair in purple clothing attached itself to Sasuke. Sasuke immediately growled. Get off me. Ino got off Sasuke as she saw the look on his face. She could tell he really didn't want to be bothered right now. The rest of Ino's team made their way over. They nodded at each other. However, the resident loud mouth of their year decided yelling would be a good idea. Yahoo! Found you! Kiba and his teammates Shino and Hinata stood behind him. Hinata was concerned at the look on her crush's face. Naruto-kun, are you alright? Naruto nodded his head slowly. At that point, a silver-haired bespectacled man came over. He had a Konoha symbol on his forehead. You guys should probably be aware of your surroundings. Take a look around you. They did so, seeing that people were glaring at them with hatred. They turned back to Kabuto. Maybe I should give my cute underclassmen some information, then. Kabuto reached back into his bag and pulled out a stack of orange cards. He put the top one on the ground and began spinning it with his finger. He released a bit of chakra and the blank card let off a small amount of smoke to reveal a three-dimensional world map and bar graph. Kabuto looked up at them. Each country has sent participants to the exams this year. This gives a breakdown of how many from each country are attending. The newest village is the village of Odo. They only have 3 entrants and they're a small village, so I don't have much information on them. At this point, Kabuto became aware of 3 people rushing out of the crowd to attack him. One of them threw 2 kunais at him while another appeared right in front of him and struck at his face, however he missed. Kabuto smiled. You seem to have missed. The bandaged guy smiled. Really? At that point, Kabuto's glasses cracked and he coughed up blood. Naruto's mind was still fresh with the scene of carnage back at the wave, and he began quivering. Kinda like Tsunade when she first appears. Sasuke turned to Naruto and pulled out a jar that the medical staff had given him in case Naruto relapsed again. The sound Nins laughed. He suffers that much from seeing a bit of blood. What a weakling. Sasuke glared at him. I'm sure you've heard the rumors of the massacre at the wave 2 weeks ago. They nodded. Naruto was there to witness it firsthand. Trust me, the rumors don't do the massacre justice. The sound nin with the head guard looked at Naruto. So, you survived that You're lucky. Sasuke shook his head. Would you consider him lucky if he was the one who? Naruto cut him off. Sasuke, don't. Sasuke nodded and shut up. He decided to pop the top of the jar off and pulled one of the dark brown pellets out. Naruto, please eat this. It should lessen the backlash. Naruto ate it before finally calming himself after 20 or so seconds, slowly stopping his shivering. At that point, there was an explosion of smoke in the front of the room. Everyone turned to see the smoke clear, revealing a man in a black trench coat with a line of men and women in gray jumpsuits. Sorry to keep you waiting. I'm the Chunin exam's first examiner, Morino Ibiki. Ibiki leveled his finger at the tree from Odo. You 3 from the hidden village of Odo. Don't think you can do anything you want before the exam. Do you want us to fail you already? The bandaged one turned to Ibiki. My apologies. I was excited since this was my first exam. Ibiki smirked as he surveyed the genin in the room. This is a good chance to say this. You are not allowed to fight anyone without the permission of the examiners. If permission is given, depending on the situation, you may or may not be allowed to kill your opponent. Pigs who go against me will be failed immediately. Understood. The genins didn't say a word, which Ibiki took as a yes. Ibiki smiled coldly at them. We will now begin the first test of the Chunin exam. Turn in your applications and take one of these number tags. Sit where the number tells you. Then we will pass out papers for the written exam. The Chunin next to Ibiki put a stack of papers on the desk and started putting them face down. Once everyone had taken their place, Ibiki tapped the chalk on the board. This exam has several important rules. Listen up. because I'm only saying these once and I will not accept questions. First rule. You are all given 10 points at the start. Unlike regular tests, this test is a subtraction test. For each question you do not answer or answer incorrectly, you lose 1 point. Each question is worth 1 point and there are 10 questions. If you answer 3 incorrectly, you lose 3 points, leaving you with 7. Rule 2. The pass-fail decision is determined by your team's total points. Sakura slammed her head on the desk and began protesting. Shut up. I said to not interfere. There is a reason for this, so shut up and listen. Now that you know about that rule, let's move on to the next one. If one of the examiners catches you doing any sort of suspicious activities like cheating, they will mark you down by 2 points. In other words, there will be those who are forced to leave this place before their tests are graded. Those who try to cheat without thinking carefully will only hurt themselves. One of the Chunin lowered his head to hide his sneer. We'll check you at any time. You are all trying to become Chunin. If you are a ninja, act like a first-rate one. Finally, if anyone in a team gets 0, they and their teammates will be failed immediately. People began muttering amongst themselves, but Ibiki quietened them. The last question will be given 45 minutes after the exam begins. You have 1 hour for this exam. Begin. Not a single student failed to comply. Naruto looked at the paper in amusement. I can't answer a single damn one of these questions. These aren't even Chunin level questions. Kyubi. Any ideas? Naruto had only just recently started talking to Kyubi again after he apologized for his behavior in the wave. Somehow, letting Kyubi control Naruto had opened a telepathic link of sorts that let them communicate without entering the subconscious mind. I may not understand the questions themselves, but I understand the idea the questions are trying to get across. Tap the signal for Sasuke to copy you. Naruto tapped his pencil on the table 7 times, indicating Sasuke to use his Sharingan on Naruto. Sasuke immediately activated his Sharingan and copied Naruto's movements, which stopped at odd intervals before resuming. Sakura was fine answering the questions by herself, and they all finished at about the same time. Once they had finished, Naruto tapped the pencil on the table 3 times, indicating to watch each other's backs for cheating attempts. Naruto was the first one to notice one directed at Sakura from Ino, who had obviously been waiting for Sakura to finish. Naruto tapped once, indicating Sakura was under attack, so to speak. Sakura, accidentally, dropped her pencil on the floor, leaning down just as Ino's projected mind would have struck her body. Since Sakura wasn't there, Ino's mind passed her seat and shot out the window, not to return for several minutes. Sakura picked up her pencil and tapped once to indicate she was okay. There was only a minute left until the final question was given. When that minute was up, Ibiki addressed them. I will now give the 10th problem. Oh, but before that, there's one thing I must say. There will be a special rule for this last question. Just then, the door opened and Kankuro came back in. You're just in time. I trust your playing with dolls was beneficial. Kankuro said nothing as he walked past his blonde-haired teammate, expertly dropping a rolled-up piece of paper onto her desk before he took his seat. I will now explain. This is a hopeless rule. The first part of that rule is whether you want to take the question or not. Tamari called out to Ibiki. Choose not to take it. What if we decline? Then I will reduce you and your team's points to 0, failing you immediately. This caused a stir in the genin, which Ibiki promptly put a stop to. If you don't shut up, I'll fail you all right here and now. That was the first part of the rule. The second part is, if you decide to take it and answer it incorrectly, you will be refused entry to all future Chunin exams. Kiba pointed a finger at Ibiki. What kind of a stupid rule is that? There are those here who've failed before. Ibiki laughed coldly. Unfortunately for you, This is my first time as an examiner. The other times, the rules were different. However, while you're in my exam, you will submit to my rules or get out. Those who are not confident in themselves, I have been kind enough to give the option of leaving with minimal consequences, and take the exam next year or the year after that. Ibiki let this sink in, before continuing. Let's begin. Those who do not feel confident, raise your hand. After we have confirmed your numbers, you will be required to leave. After about a minute, someone finally cracked and raised their hand. It was the guy right next to Naruto. I won't take it. I quit. Number 50, fail. Number 130 and 111 fail along with him. This set off a chain reaction, with over a quarter of the remaining people's hands being raised. After a while, people stopped raising their hands. Ibiki looked over the rest. The rest of them either showed no emotions on their face, or they showed pure confidence. Ibiki realized this wasn't going to get any further, and so smiled at them. Well then, the rest of you. Pass. People had no idea how to respond. Naturally, Sakura was the first to respond. Wait, what's the meaning of this? What happened to the 10th question? Ibiki laughed light-heartedly. There was no such thing to begin with. However, if you really want to believe there was a 10th question, I guess you could call the take or not take decision the 10th question. Tamari was next to question. Then the first 9 questions were useless. Ibiki smiled. Were they? No, they served their purpose. The first 9 questions tested your information gathering skills. First, this test's purpose lies in the first rule. Your pass-fail decision OS based on your 3-person teams. By giving you that idea, we were placing a huge load of pressure onto each of you to not let your teams down. As the majority of you noticed almost straight away, these are not Genin level questions, and some of them are not even Chunin level questions. So the majority of people must have come to the conclusion that you had to cheat to get the answers. Naruto sighed and thought, I wonder if consulting a 4,000-year-old demon is considered cheating. Therefore, this test was made with the idea in mind that each and every one of you were going to cheat. So we snuck 2 Chunins in who knew the answers to be the target of cheating. Naturally, those who cheated poorly were failed. At this point, Ibiki began undoing his Hitai-8 which covered the top of his head. Naruto knew what was coming and looked away, stopping himself from relapsing. Everyone else looked at Ibiki in horror. Ibiki continued his explanation. Why? Information can have a greater value than life sometimes, and in missions and battlefields, information is contested for with people's lives. The information that an enemy gets after being noticed by a third person will not entirely be accurate. Remember this. Getting incorrect information can cause great damahe to your teammates in your village. So we all made you gather information in the form of cheating. We kicked out those that were lacking in that field. That's what the first 9 questions were about. Tamari apparently still wasn't satisfied. Then what about the last question? The 10th question is the main part of this test. Let me explain. The 10th question was a take or not take choice. Needless to say, it was a painful 2-choice problem. Those who did not take it failed the entire exam along with their team. If you did take it and got it wrong, you had your right to take the Chunin exam permanently revoked. It was a very insincere problem. Let me put this problem into a real-life situation. Let's assume that you have become Chunin. Your mission is to capture a secret document. The number of enemy ninja, their abilities and armaments are unknown, as well as the fact that the enemy ninja may have set traps for you. Now, will you accept this mission or not? Just because your life and the lives of your teammates are on the line, are you able to avoid dangerous missions? The answer is no. There are missions that will carry heavy risks that you will be unable to avoid. The ability to show your courage to your teammates when needed, and the ability to get through a bad situation. That is what we look for in a chunin, a squad leader. Those who cannot bet their lives in a critical situation, those who give up when given the chance because there is a next year, and let their minds sway over an uncertain future, do not deserve the right to wear a chunin jacket. That is what I believe. I am saying that those of you here who have chosen to take it have given the correct answer to the difficult 10th question. You will be able to deal with the difficulties a chunin must face. You have broken through the entrance. Congratulations on passing the first test. I wish you all luck. At that point, a giant black ball smashed through the window, before unfurling itself, with two kunai driving into the roof to reveal. Everyone. There's no time to be happy. I am the second examiner, Mitarashi Anko. Everyone looked at her as if she were an alien. Behind her, the black piece of cloth read, the second examiner, Mitarashi Anko is here. Anko wore a very short brown skirt with fishnet leggings that went halfway down her thighs. She wore a beige trek coat and a fishnet shirt underneath that left practically nothing to the imagination. She wore metal greaves and black sandals. She had purple hair that was pulled back into a very shikamaru-like pineapple hairstyle. Let's go to the next exam. Follow me. Ibiki came out from behind the piece of cloth. Grasp the atmosphere before you barge in here. Anko looked over the remaining genin. 78 genin. The first test was too soft this year, Ibiki. Ibiki shook his head. No, they're all exceptional genin. This year's crop is something far out of the ordinary. Anko looked at them with a sadistic smile on her face. It doesn't matter. By the time I'm through with them, less than half will remain. We will begin tomorrow. Ask your Junin instructors about the rally point and time, as it won't be here. That is all. Dismissed.